The sky over Paris was overcast that afternoon, but the hum of life on Rue Montorgueil made up for the lack of sun. People passed by with baguettes tucked under their arms, and the aroma of fresh espresso floated from every café. Inside one such café, tucked discreetly on the corner with ivy crawling up its facade, sat Elise Marchand. She was in her 30s, dressed in a navy peacoat, her auburn hair tied in a neat bun, fingers curled around a steaming cup of coffee. She was not there to enjoy the Parisian charm. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, were fixed on her laptop screen. On it was an article from L'Eclat, the most prestigious art and culture magazine in the city. The headline read, "The Vision Behind Lumiere, Exclusive Interview with Julien Caron." Elise's mouth tightened as she scrolled. Julien's face, smug and perfectly lit, filled half the page. The quotes were a twisted echo of her words, her ideas, her creative vision. The art installation Lumiere had been hers from the start. From the first napkin sketches at the very table where she now sat, to the sleepless nights programming light algorithms that mimicked human emotion. Julien had been involved, of course, but only as a collaborator, a facilitator. He had never led. The betrayal felt like a punch to the ribs, delivered with velvet gloves. Her phone buzzed beside her. A message from Camille, her closest friend and fellow artist. Saw the article. What the hell? Elise typed quickly, her fingers trembling. He took everything. He's pretending he built Lumiere himself. Even the heartbeat sequence, I never showed anyone else that code. The door chimed as someone entered. Elise looked up instinctively. It was a tourist, not Julien. She relaxed, but only slightly. She had not seen him in weeks, not since Lumiere had debuted to rapturous applause in the Jardin des Plantes. He had disappeared the next day. She had assumed he was busy with post-launch press. Now she understood why. Elise shut her laptop and stared out the window. Across the street, a poster advertising Lumiere still hung proudly, her name nowhere to be seen. There was only Julien's signature in the corner, stylized and smug. Her heart burned with humiliation. But more than that, a spark of resolve was beginning to light inside her. She was going to tell the truth. Not just to Camille. To everyone. But first she had to find Julien. Translation. In this chapter, Elise Marchand sits in a café in Paris, shocked and furious after discovering that Julien Caron has taken public credit for her art installation, Lumiere. While the project had been her idea and her execution, Julien has claimed it entirely as his own in a high-profile interview. As she reads the article and receives a supportive message from her friend Camille, Elise resolves to uncover the truth and reclaim her work, but first, she must track Julien down. The following day, the streets of Saint-Germain were slick from a morning rain, the cobblestones shining like polished glass. Elise moved quickly, hood up, eyes darting beneath shop awnings and art gallery signs. She knew Julien often frequented this quarter, especially the gallery of Madame Lefebvre, an eccentric curator with a taste for rising stars and stolen brilliance. She pushed open the heavy glass door of the gallery, the tiny bell above jingling softly. The scent of varnish and old wood lingered in the air, mingling with the faint citrus of someone's perfume. A new exhibit was being installed. Minimalist lighting. Empty, white panels. And there, beside a ladder and two assistants, was Julien Caron. He was laughing, relaxed, his dark curls a little too perfect. He had always looked like a romanticized version of an artist. Just enough mess to seem tortured, just enough polish to seem successful. Elise approached him silently, the sound of her boots echoing against the floor. Julien turned and froze. "Elle," he said with an awkward smile. "I didn't expect. You didn't expect me to read?" Her voice was low but sharp. "Or care that you took everything?" He glanced nervously at the assistants, then led her aside to a corner near a half-finished sculpture. "I was going to talk to you," he said. "But the press moved fast. I had to give them something." "You gave them everything. You gave them me, Julien." She stared into his eyes. "The code. The concept. Even my childhood story about light and grief. You sold it as your own." Julien's face hardened. "I didn't sell it. I presented it. The world needs a face, Elise. A name they can remember. You. You mean someone with a penis and a press kit? She snapped. His lips twitched, not quite a smile. I mean someone who knows how the game works. And right now, I'm the one in the spotlight. What do you think happens if you try to blow it up? I don't care about the spotlight, but I do care about truth. Julian's expression shifted. Not fear. Something colder, calculation. Go ahead then, he said, voice calm.
Try.
Tell them your version. Who do you think they'll believe? A soft-spoken programmer with no exhibitions, or the man who's already booked for TEDx Paris? Elise said nothing. She simply looked at him, studying the quiet arrogance in his posture. He truly believed he had won, that she would fold, disappear, create something else in silence. But he was wrong. As she turned and walked away, her heart thundered with something deeper than anger, conviction. Camille had contacts. So did Clara at the university. And Elise had everything she needed: the original files, the sketches, the time-stamped audio logs. The truth had teeth, and she was going to let it bite. Translation. In this chapter, Elise confronts Julian at an art gallery in Saint-Germain. Julian defends his betrayal, claiming he merely played the publicity game. He arrogantly challenges her to try exposing the truth, confident that no one will believe her. But Elise, more determined than ever, realizes she has the proof and the will to fight back. Her resolve deepens. This battle is far from over. It was late afternoon when Elise met Camille at Café de Revolts, a modest place tucked between a bookstore and a vinyl shop. The kind of café where secrets had been whispered over chipped espresso cups for decades. They chose a quiet corner near the fogged window. A jazz record played softly in the background, like a heartbeat too tired to dance. Camille stirred her drink slowly, watching Elise with steady eyes. So he took it all. And you have proof. Elise nodded, setting down a flash drive between them like a weapon. I need people to hear my story. Not just for me, but for every quiet mind that gets stepped on by a louder mouth. Camille smiled faintly. You came to the right woman. For years, Camille had run a digital publication that championed unsung innovators, especially women in tech and science. Her readers didn't care for polished press releases or pretty faces. They wanted authenticity. Truth. Fire. I'll do the article, Camille said. But that alone won't bring him down. He's already orbiting fame. You'll need more than a well-written essay. Elise knew she was right. Then we'll build momentum. I'll show them the real work. My raw files. The sketches. I'll walk them through how the system works. Line by line. Camille looked at her friend with admiration. You're going to give the world a tour of your mind. Exactly, Elise said. And I want it to burn into their memory that it was mine, not his. As they planned, a shadow passed by the window, pausing just a moment too long. Neither woman noticed at first. But someone had followed her, someone who now knew she was making her move. That night, when Elise returned home, her front door was ajar. She stopped mid-step, heart thudding against her ribs. The light in the hallway flickered once, then died. For a moment, silence stretched thin and terrifying. Then, from within the apartment, a voice drifted out. Playing with fire, Elise. Julian. She stepped back instinctively, but his silhouette emerged from the shadows of her living room, calm, composed. Not angry, not afraid, disappointed. You shouldn't have gone to Camille, he said. It's not too late to drop this. You can have your name in the acknowledgments. Maybe even co-creator credit. Elise stared at him, fury rising like bile. Get out, he shrugged. Think about it. There's a fine line between genius and forgotten. And just like that, he left, vanishing into the Parisian dusk like a phantom. But this time, Elise wasn't shaking. She wasn't afraid. She was done being quiet. Translation. In this chapter, Elise teams up with her friend Camille at a local cafe to plan her counterattack against Julian. Camille agrees to help publish her story, but warns it will take more than just words. That evening, Elise finds her flat has been broken into. Julian is there, offering her a chance to back down. She refuses. For the first time, she stands firm, no longer afraid to fight for her voice. The days that followed were like stepping into a storm Elise had summoned herself. Camille worked swiftly, her fingers dancing across the keyboard, crafting the exposé with surgical precision. She paired Elise's voice with undeniable evidence, blueprints, patent drafts, and time-stamped footage of Elise explaining the neural interface long before Julian ever appeared on stage. The article went live on a Thursday morning. Within an hour, it began to spread. By noon, the headline, "The Woman Behind Paris' Greatest Innovation," trended across social platforms. Not because of sensationalism, but because it resonated with every silenced engineer, every overlooked researcher, every voice that had been drowned in boardrooms and labs. Camille had made sure to credit the genius, but also the theft. But Elise's battle was only beginning. Julian responded within the day, an emergency press conference outside the gleaming doors of the French Tech Assembly Hall. He was polished as ever, his smile mechanical, his charm packaged. "I deeply admire Elise," he said into the cameras. "But her claims are simply a misunderstanding of collaborative effort." A misunderstanding. That word clung to Elise like oil. She watched from Camille's apartment, her fingers clenched around a chipped coffee mug. "He's not denying it, just spinning it." Camille nodded. Classic PR tactic. Gaslight and distract. Yet even with evidence on her side, public opinion split like brittle glass. Half believed her, outraged on her behalf. The other half clung to Julian's persona, convinced she was bitter, jealous, or mentally unstable. Still, messages began pouring in. From students, from retired scientists, from a woman in Marseille who said her thesis had been rewritten by a male supervisor and published without her name. The truth had cracked something open. But then the threat started. At first, anonymous comments. Then emails. Then a voice message left on Camille's phone, a single sentence spoken through a disguised filter. "Stop publishing or she disappears." Camille played it for Elise twice. They sat in silence, the glow of the laptop screen casting long shadows. "I should go to the police," Elise murmured. "And tell them what?" "That Julian is trying to erase you again. This time literally." It was Camille's calm that made it real. That night, Elise slept on Camille's couch, haunted by the thought that her worst fear wasn't being erased anymore. It was being silenced again. But the next morning, she woke with a decision. No more hiding. If Julian wanted to play in public, then public is where she would fight him. On live television, she emailed a broadcast network, offered to debate Julian. No scripts. No pre-approval. Just the raw truth. The network replied in under 10 minutes. They were in. Translation. Elise and Camille published the exposé, and it immediately sparks nationwide interest. Julian responds with charm and deflection, denying nothing but blaming everything on misunderstanding. The public is divided, and Elise starts receiving threats. But rather than retreat, she chooses to confront Julian live on air, determined to reclaim her story in full view of the world. The studio lights were blinding, harsher than Elise expected. Everything about the set was designed to look neutral. Muted grays, crisp lines, two identical chairs facing each other like chess pieces. But Elise knew better. This wasn't a conversation. It was a duel. Julian arrived minutes before they went live, dressed like he had just stepped out of a luxury campaign shoot. Perfect suit. Polished shoes. Smile carved by years of practice. "Elise," he said, with that smooth, patronizing tone. "Still convinced of your own fantasy?" She didn't answer. Not with words. Her stare was enough. The host, a well-known journalist named Odile Fournier, welcomed them both with the usual pleasantries. But even her tone carried an undercurrent. This wasn't entertainment. It was reckoning. The cameras rolled. Julian began as expected. Confident. Articulate. He framed their partnership as a brilliant synergy where roles often overlapped, and memories can be unreliable when emotions run high. Then it was Elise's turn. "I built the neural framework in my father's old workshop," she said, her voice steady. Before I even met Julian, I had mapped over 80% of the data-to-thought transmission model. I have dated files, blueprints, and even video logs. Odile leaned forward. And why didn't you speak out earlier? I did, Elise replied. He erased me. He took the model, published under his own name, and when I resisted, I was discredited. Quietly, efficiently. Julian laughed, but it sounded forced. She's clearly been under pressure. This sort of delusion. Elise reached into her folder and pulled out the prototype drive. This was in my possession years before our partnership. Check the metadata. I've submitted it to an independent lab for authentication. The host raised an eyebrow. The control room cut to the lab statement, already verified. Julian shifted in his seat. His smile faltered. And then Elise made her move. Julian, she said calmly, remember the night we met? You said you wanted to change the world. You didn't say you'd start by changing the authorship on someone else's future. The silence in the studio was deafening. Odile asked no more questions. The program ended. Within minutes, social media exploded. Hashtag Justice for Elise. Hashtag Neural Theft. Hashtag Julian Exposed. Some called it the interview of the decade. Others called it the beginning of the end for Julian Moreau. But Elise knew the media could be fickle. Today's truth could be tomorrow's controversy. So she did something unexpected. She announced the full release of her neural framework, open source. Free for anyone to study, build, and improve upon. She wasn't here to win a battle. She was here to change the entire system. Translation. Elise faces Julian live on national television and publicly presents irrefutable evidence that she was the true creator of the neural interface. Julian tries to deflect, but the facts speak louder. After the interview, Elise releases her research to the world as open source, shifting the focus from revenge to revolution. The next morning, Paris was a city buzzing with shock, admiration, and disbelief. Newsstands were lined with bold headlines. Julian Moreau's pristine image was cracking under the weight of truth, while Elise Duchamp's name was finally spoken with respect, even reverence. Yet in the quiet of her modest flat in the 11th arrondissement, Elise was not celebrating. She sat by the window with a cup of lukewarm tea, staring out at the narrow street below. People passed by unaware that the woman who had just overturned one of the tech world's most revered figures lived amongst them. She liked it that way. Recognition was never the goal. But fallout has a rhythm of its own. The board of Neuropulse International held an emergency meeting that afternoon. They released a carefully worded statement acknowledging allegations and promising a full internal review. Behind closed doors, however, directors panicked. Investors withdrew millions within hours. Julian, meanwhile, disappeared from public view. Paparazzi camped outside his penthouse. Some said he fled to Geneva. Others claimed he was hiding in a chateau in Bordeaux. Elise didn't care where he went. She cared what he would do next. Because power rarely concedes quietly. Later that evening, a parcel arrived at her door. No note. Just a sleek, black envelope containing a non-disclosure agreement, and signed, and a check. 7 figures. She smiled bitterly. The offer was clear. Silence in exchange for security. She tore it in half. Then the phone rang. It was Camille, her old friend and legal advisor. They're moving fast, she said. Julian's team has filed an injunction against your open-source release, claiming it includes proprietary elements from Neuropulse. Elise's fingers tightened around the receiver. They're trying to put the genie back in the bottle. It's not just legal pressure, Camille warned. They've started a media counter-campaign. New anchors, new script. They're painting you as unstable, vindictive, even accusing you of theft. It was déjà vu. The same tactics, the same gaslighting. But this time, Elise had allies. Engineers from Berlin, researchers in Tokyo, students from Buenos Aires, they had already downloaded her framework. They were building on it, sharing ideas, improving it. The code was no longer hers alone. It was alive and growing. The more Neuropulse pushed, the more the world resisted. Then, a breakthrough. One of the engineers, a teenage prodigy from South Korea, discovered an unused string in the original code that clearly linked the source files to Elise's earliest logs. It was a smoking gun that confirmed her authorship beyond dispute. When the findings went viral, Neuropulse's attempt to regain control imploded. But Julian wasn't finished. One night, Elise returned home to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was out of place, except for a photograph placed neatly on her bed. It was of her and Julian, taken years ago at a conference in Vienna. On the back, scrawled in ink, "You've made this personal. So will I." She stared at the message. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Translation: as the world reacts to Elise's public exposure of the truth, Neuropulse and Julian strike back with legal threats and a media campaign to discredit her. Though the tech community rallies behind her, the pressure mounts. Julian disappears, then leaves a chilling message in her flat, signaling a darker, more personal confrontation ahead. The days that followed were thick with tension. Elise walked with sharper awareness, her keys between her fingers, her phone always charged. She declined interviews. She installed a new lock. But no matter how many steps she took, she could not shake the feeling of being watched. And then, one morning, it became clear that the fight had escalated. Her email was flooded with messages. Not threats, not spam, job offers. High-profile companies in Paris, London, San Francisco, each more generous than the last. But all had the same tone: corporate, rehearsed, and unusually urgent. Camille reviewed the contracts. "They're trying to absorb you. If they hire you, they silence you. The moment you accept, they'll own the rights to your mind. That's the game now." Elise declined everyone, but the strategy shifted again. Two journalists from major outlets contacted her within hours of each other. Both claimed to be writing exposés about the early years of Neuropulse and wanted her side of the story. "They were tipped off," Camille said. "They're baiting you. If you share too much, they'll twist it. If you say too little, they'll fill in the blanks." So Elise stayed silent. That week, someone leaked photos of her during university, her younger self at protests, a cigarette in hand, eyes half closed in laughter. The headlines followed swiftly. From visionary to volatile, the many faces of Elise Duchamp. Her credibility began to fray, but not among those who mattered. At Sorbonne, a professor paused her lecture to speak about Elise's courage. Students posted clips of her original presentation with the hashtag #CreditElise. Artists painted murals on café walls in Montmartre. It was no longer just about code. It was about truth. And Julian felt it slipping. He made his next move through intermediaries. A respected academic published a paper discrediting the mathematical foundation of Elise's algorithm. The claim? Her results were fabricated. But within 48 hours, an independent analysis from Oxford dismantled the critique, revealing that the academic's research had been funded by a Neuropulse subsidiary. Julian's desperation showed. Then came the real blow. One of Julian's former assistants, a woman named Amira, contacted Elise anonymously. She had evidence, emails, meeting transcripts, time-stamped audio files, proving that Julian had knowingly stolen Elise's work and orchestrated the suppression. But Amira was afraid. "If I speak, they'll come for me too," she said, voice trembling on the encrypted call. "But I can't stay quiet." Elise promised protection. She and Camille arranged a meeting in a neutral location, a quiet cafe in Le Marais. As the bell above the door jingled and Amira stepped inside, a hush fell over the air. Amira slid a flash drive across the table. "It's all here. But once this is out, there's no turning back." Elise stared at it. For the first time, she hesitated. This was the final fuse. And once lit, everything would explode. Translation: as Elise faces increasing pressure through corporate manipulation and a public smear campaign, a whistleblower emerges with definitive proof of Julian's deception. Elise realizes that exposing the full truth may bring justice, but also unleash consequences beyond control. The night after receiving Amira's proof, Elise barely slept. Her mind raced through every possible outcome: every choice that lay ahead. She was caught in a storm of conflicting thoughts. On one hand, the truth had to come out. The world needed to know what Julian had done, the lives he destroyed in pursuit of power and profit. But on the other, she knew there was no coming back from it. If she released the information, it would be the end of her anonymity, her safety, and perhaps her future. The people she loved could be hurt too. But she had made a promise to Amira and to herself. She couldn't allow Julian to manipulate the narrative any longer. The next morning, Elise and Camille sat in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of half-drunk coffee mugs and scattered notes. They went through the files, scrutinizing every detail once more. The evidence was undeniable. Julian's direct involvement in the sabotage of her career, the subversion of competitors, the rigging of data, all of it. It was a story that could unravel the very core of Neuropulse, a company that had, for too long, controlled the flow of information. And Elise was the one who could bring it all to light. "I'll need to plan this carefully," Camille said, flipping through the documents. "We go public with this, and you'll need to have your protection in place. No going back once it's out." Elise nodded. Her mind was made up. She couldn't let fear control her anymore. That evening, after much deliberation, she contacted a journalist, an old acquaintance who had reported on similar high-profile cases. Elise had always trusted his integrity, even though he had occasionally disagreed with her in the past. She didn't give him everything at once. She offered him just enough to get his attention, just enough to begin unraveling the truth. "Meet me tomorrow," he texted back. That night, the weight of the decision finally hit her. The consequences were inevitable, but so was the potential for justice. The next day, they met in a quiet cafe near the Seine. The journalist arrived early, scanning the room, but Elise recognized the tension in his eyes as he spotted her. She wasn't surprised. After all, the game had changed. He knew she was no longer just a tech pioneer. She was now a target. "I've looked at the documents you sent," he said, sitting down. "This is huge. It could break Neuropulse wide open." Elise swallowed. Her throat felt dry. "I'm ready, but I need a guarantee." "What kind of guarantee?" he asked, leaning forward. "That my story won't be twisted. That it won't be used to attack the people who've already supported me. No matter what." The journalist nodded solemnly. "You have my word. I'm not interested in sensationalism, just the truth." And so, the wheels were set in motion. But not everyone would accept this truth without a fight. The following morning, as the journalist worked tirelessly to piece together the information, Elise received an unexpected call. It was from Amira. "He's moving fast," Amira said, her voice shaky. "Julian. He knows. He's already tried to reach out to people close to you. He's making threats." Elise's stomach churned. Julian wasn't going to let this go easily. "It's too late," Elise said, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "We're already too deep. There's no turning back now." But Amira's voice trembled with uncertainty. "But what if you're not safe? What if they come for you?" "I won't hide," Elise replied, her resolve hardening. "I've already lost too much." The battle was on, and it would only get fiercer. But Elise had no intention of backing down. Translation. As Elise moves forward with exposing the truth, the risks intensify. She prepares herself for the inevitable fallout, knowing that once the story is public, there is no turning back. Julian's retaliation begins, but Elise's determination grows stronger with each passing hour. The days following Elise's meeting with the journalist were filled with a sense of impending dread. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching her. Every car that passed by, every shadow in the corner of her eye, felt like an omen. Julian's grip on the situation was tightening, and Elise knew the walls were closing in. Amira had warned her that Julian would strike back, but Elise hadn't expected how quickly he would react. Her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before answering, already knowing it was him. "Elise." Julian's voice was cold, almost too controlled. "I know what you're trying to do. You're making a mistake." "I'm not making any mistake, Julian."
The truth is coming out.
It's time for people to know who you really are. There was a silence on the other end, followed by a bitter laugh. You think they'll believe you over me? You think your little story will change anything? I built this empire. You've never even understood it. Elise's pulse quickened. I understand more than you think. And I'm not afraid of you anymore. Julian's voice lowered, becoming threatening. You think you've won? You're a fool, Elise. You'll regret this. You and everyone you care about. The line went dead. For a moment, Elise stood in the middle of her apartment, feeling a chill settle in her bones. But she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. She had made her decision, and now there was no turning back. That afternoon, as the journalist worked tirelessly on preparing the first part of the exposé, Elise received another call. This time it wasn't from Julian, it was from Camille. Elise, you need to leave.
Now.
Camille's voice was frantic. I've seen the news. Your name's already being dragged through the mud. They're painting you as the villain, the one trying to tear down a successful company. And there's more. Julian's been making calls. He's coming after you. Elise's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean, he's coming after me? There are people in the company loyal to him, Camille continued. And they'll do whatever it takes to protect his interests. You need to disappear, at least for a while. You're not safe. Elise glanced around her apartment. The place that had been her sanctuary for so long suddenly felt like a prison. She knew Camille was right. Staying in Paris was no longer an option. Okay,
I'll go.
but I'm not backing down. As she packed her things, the weight of the situation finally hit her. This wasn't just about her career or even about Julian anymore. It was about something bigger, the truth. She had taken the first step, and now she would see it through, no matter the cost. That night, she boarded a flight to a small town in the south of France. It was a place she had once visited as a child, a place far removed from the chaos of her life in Paris. She needed time to think, to strategize, to plan her next move. But she knew one thing for certain. She couldn't hide forever. Julian would find her eventually, and when he did, the battle would be even more intense. In the meantime, the journalist continued to work behind the scenes, preparing the full exposé. With every passing day, the storm grew closer. The pressure was mounting, and Elise was starting to realize the true cost of her choices. But no matter what came next, she was ready. Translation. Elise is forced to leave Paris as Julian's retaliation begins, with his influence stretching far beyond her reach. As she relocates, she steels herself for the storm that is coming, knowing the stakes have never been higher. The small town in the south of France was a peaceful place, far removed from the hustle and bustle of Paris. The cobblestone streets, the distant hum of the sea, and the fragrant air were all reminders of a simpler time in Elise's life. But peace was fleeting. She knew her time here was limited. Every night, she would sit by the window of the small cottage she had rented, watching the stars. It was her escape from the chaos that had once been her life, but even here, she could feel the tension gnawing at her. She couldn't hide forever. The storm was coming, and she had to face it. In the days that followed, she kept in touch with Camille and the journalist. They had been working around the clock, gathering evidence, reaching out to people who could corroborate her story. The first parts of the exposé had already started making waves, but Julian's camp was fighting back with everything they had. Yet, Elise knew the final reveal would be the one to change everything. She had proof, undeniable proof, that would expose Julian for who he truly was, a manipulative businessman who would stop at nothing to protect his empire. And with this proof, she could bring down the very foundation of his control. One morning, just as the sun began to rise over the Mediterranean, Elise received a message. It was from the journalist. The exposé will be published today. We have everything we need. It's time. Her heart raced. The moment she had been working toward for so long had finally arrived.
She didn't hesitate.
She made her way to the small cafe in town, where she had arranged to meet with Camille. The tension in the air felt thick, almost suffocating. She could sense the shift in the world around her. Something big was about to happen. At the cafe, Camille was already waiting. She looked pale, but there was a fire in her eyes. "You're sure about this, Elise? Once it's out there, there's no going back." Elise nodded, her resolve unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." As the hours ticked by, the world seemed to hold its breath. By late afternoon, the exposé was live. The headlines screamed the truth. Julian was not the visionary he portrayed himself to be. He had manipulated, controlled, and betrayed those who trusted him. His empire, built on deceit and lies, was now in the public eye for all to see. But with the publication came the fallout. Julian's team went into overdrive, issuing statements, discrediting sources, and attempting to spin the narrative in his favor. Elise's name was once again dragged through the mud, but this time, there was no escaping the truth. Julian's facade began to crack. The people who had once stood by him now questioned his integrity. The company's stock price began to plummet. His allies were starting to turn against him. It was only a matter of time before he would have to face the consequences of his actions. That night, Elise sat in the quiet of her cottage, staring at the screen of her laptop. The messages were flooding in, some from supporters, others from those who still clung to Julian's version of the story. But the truth had been set free, and there was no denying it now. In the days that followed, Julian's empire slowly began to crumble. Lawsuits, investigations, and media backlash overwhelmed him. The world had learned who he really was, and the consequences were catastrophic. As for Elise, she finally felt the weight lift from her shoulders. She had lost so much in this fight, but she had gained something more important: the truth. And with that, the battle was over. The storm had passed, but the scars would remain. Translation. With the final reveal of Julian's manipulations, Elise's exposé takes the world by storm. His empire collapses under the weight of the truth, and Elise finally finds peace, knowing she has fought for what was right, no matter the cost. That concludes the story. Thank you for allowing me to help bring it to life.